So we're going to talk a little bit about squatting. So a lot of people have pinching in the front of their hip when they go into a squat. And we've talked a little bit about the morphology, about if you actually have true impingement, but we haven't talked about how sometimes people have different body shapes. So Meg and I are relatively the same height, but the top of my hip comes up to, about here on Meg. And the top of Meg's hip is way down low. So I have a longer femur than Meg does. So getting that nice, perfect Olympic style squat is harder for me because my femur is so much longer. It's harder for me to keep my torso nice and erect. And if I were to do that in squat, I have to almost anteriorly tilt, which then puts more impingement on the hip for me to get down low. And then my torso falls forward. It's just not the greatest position for me because my femur is so long. Meg has a much shorter femur, so she can go into that nice full depth squat, keep a nice neutral spine. Her torso is nice and beautiful. I wish I had that squat. The other thing that might be playing a role outside of just your femur length to torso ratio could be ankle mobility. I've had both my ankles reconstructed, so I have limited dorsiflexion this way in my ankles. So you saw my squat before. It's not the prettiest thing ever, but if I get my heels a little bit elevated on something and take my ankles out of the equation, now I'm actually able to go into a much nicer, deeper squat, not have the hip impingement in the front of my hip. My torso stays nice and tall, and I can maintain a neutral pelvis to avoid that pinching. So for me, maybe being in like an Olympic lifting shoe when I'm squatting is a little bit better as well. So it might be that the hip is pinching, but also look other places to see is limited mobility down there causing some of that impingement in the hip.